In a galaxy dominated by fierce species vying for control, humans are about to defy all expectations, showing that true strength doesn't lie in size or brute force, but in surviving the most unforgiving worlds. Witness as they break records, astound alien civilizations, and redefine what it means to be unstoppable. Is that really a human? Lieutenant CRA's 3 eyes blinked rapidly. He adjusted his visor's light filter, squinting harder at the stubborn, squat figure below. Yes, it's definitely human, Chief Ensign Vex said, shaking her head in disbelief as her mandibles clicked. Although, I wouldn't exactly call it typical. They stood on the edge of the observation platform aboard the Atlantic transport station, orbiting the quiet trade planet Tarx 4. The docking bay was filled with beings of every kind, most engaged in peaceful trade, yet this one human had captured the attention of every nearby crew member. Look at it, Surrey's scales shifted to a pale yellow, a sign of uncertainty. Vec, it's pacing. Vec tilted her head, observing. Yes, it's pacing, but it also keeps repeating something. Translators can't make sense of it. It just keeps saying, what was it again? Krax checked his translator. It's saying, where's my beer? They exchanged a look, and Vex sighed in resignation. That's not something we have in our cultural database. It seems harmless enough though. Perhaps it's some form of request for sustenance. The human in question was a burly, red-faced figure who looked as though he hadn't missed a meal in years. He wore a worn hat, emblazoned with a tan hawk emblem, according to Vex database, perched over stars and stripes. His demeanor could best be described as brash. His mumbling ceased when he approached a large, metallic crate. Running his hand over its surface, he glanced around, then spoke aloud, "Hold my beer." A tense silence fell over the scene. Krax and Vec exchanged uneasy glances. Despite the odd behavior, the human's actions seemed to ignite some kind of enthusiasm in him. Reaching into his bag, he pulled out a multi-tool, something neither Vec nor Krax had ever seen in any interspecies toolkit. The human leaned closer to the crate, muttering to himself. "All right, let's see if I can get this open." Krax stiffened, his eyes wide with alarm. "Open it? But that crate is marked as high-security cargo." Vec, already sensing trouble, quickly dialed in for security backup. The Atlantic crew, alerted to the disturbance, began gathering cautiously from a safe distance, some ducking behind nearby structures. "Maybe it's just a technician?" Vec suggested weakly, though the human wore no official uniform. Her optimism was dashed when she saw the wide grin spread across the human's face. This was far from the demeanor of a certified technician. "Hold my beer," the human said again with nonchalance. "They always say that," muttered one of the newly arrived security guards. "Doesn't mean a thing. But mark my words, this is about to get real dangerous." The human continued without a hint of concern, focusing intently on the crate. After several quick twists and a triumphant "Ha!" the lock clicked open with a faint pop. The alien crowd gasped collectively, but the human wasn't done yet. He flung the lid open, revealing an intense flash of bright blue light, accompanied by a deep, deafening hum that reverberated through the station. Nearby translators stuttered in confusion as the human, undeterred by the overwhelming glow, continued to speak to himself, unfazed by the chaos unfolding around him. "Need a bit more leverage," the human muttered under his breath, pulling out an object that looked oddly like a plasma torch. Vex antennae shot straight up. "Did it just pull out a plasma torch?" Krax's scales flushed a deep purple. "That can't be standard gear for whatever it thinks it's doing." The human eyed the contents of the crate, an intricate assembly of alien technology designed to withstand extreme pressure and temperature. With a grin spreading across his face, the human adjusted the plasma torch and ignited it, sending a burst of green flame roaring to life. "Yes," the human shouted triumphantly, adjusting the flame as it cut through a complex coil of circuitry and unknown modules. Sparks flew in every direction, bouncing off the walls and creating what looked like a small inferno. To any other species, it would have been chaos, but the human, focused and intent, didn't seem to notice. "Look at it," Krax whispered in horror. "It's slicing through alien tech like it's butter." One of the Atlantic spectators gripped the wall, clearly in shock. "It's not even protected. That tech has 3 layers of encrypted defense and an atomic seal." Finally, the human seemed pleased with the damage and casually sheathed the torch with a flick of the wrist. The surrounding aliens could only blink, stunned into silence by the speed and recklessness with which the human had operated. But the human wasn't finished. Reaching into the crate, he grabbed what looked to be an energy containment module, a notoriously delicate and volatile device, completely unsuitable for handling with bare hands. Vec gasped, covering her mouth. "It's holding a containment module." Without hesitation, the human stood up, shook the module briskly in his hands, and fiddled with a few of the toggles on its surface, seemingly unaware of the catastrophic energy stored within. The alien spectators began to back away slowly, several muttering frantic prayers to their respective gods. "You said it was broken," the human said cheerfully, holding the module up like a prize. "Well, it's fixed now." Before anyone could react, the human slapped a triumphant thumbs up and dropped the module back into the crate with a loud clank. The crate immediately started vibrating, sending an eerie wave of tension through the room. Vec felt her stomach churn as the hum of the vibrations grew louder and more intense, making the floor beneath them tremble. Finally, with a resounding boom, the crate fell silent. Krax could only gape, his voice shaking. "It stabilized?" The human leaned casually against the crate, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "Easy as pie. You guys got anything else that needs fixing?" Vec glanced at Krax, who looked like he had just narrowly escaped death. The crate lay still, radiating a faint warmth but otherwise stable. The surrounding aliens stood frozen, equally stunned by what had just happened. The human tilted his hat back, letting out a pleased sigh, then muttered to himself, "Told you, nothing a little ingenuity can't solve. Now, where's my beer?" In the stunned silence that followed, no one dared to speak. It wasn't long before word of the crate incident spread throughout the galaxy. The tale, already referred to as the Crate Incident, quickly went viral across Yannick communication networks, sending shockwaves throughout the intergalactic community. A mere week later, Lieutenant Krax found himself standing before a stern council of high-ranking officers, recounting every detail of the incident. None of the officers appeared pleased with what they were hearing. "So, Commander YCK," one officer said slowly, his gaze locked on Krax, "you're telling us that this human single-handedly breached a high-security containment module without any specialized equipment or training?" Krax shifted uneasily under the commander's intense stare, his scales flushing a deep shade of green. "Yes, Commander YCK, it did. I mean, the human did. But it seemed to be..." "What?" Lieutenant Yuri snapped. "It seemed to be what?" Krax cleared his throat. "It seemed to be, well, improvising, sir." At this, the council exchanged uneasy glances. The word improvisation was not one that belonged in their orderly, precise world. It was a term reserved for wild and reckless behavior, for creatures who didn't value their own lives, and now they had undeniable proof of how dangerous such behavior could be. Another officer, a wiry VXY with two unblinking eyes, leaned forward. "And you said the human repeated a phrase before attempting the breach?" Krax winced. "Yes, sir. Said, 'Hold my beer.' Twice, actually." Commander YCK's face darkened. "And do we know what this phrase means?" The council turned toward the intelligence officer, Andon Aura, who nervously shuffled through her notes. "Our translators have analyzed the phrase extensively, sir. It appears to be an idiomatic expression, suggesting that the speaker is about to undertake an act that others might consider dangerous or ill-advised." "Dangerous or ill-advised?" YCK muttered. "And yet the human succeeded remarkably?" "Yes, Commander," Aura replied, nodding vigorously. "In fact, our data suggests that humans use this phrase as a precursor to highly unpredictable behavior. It is often used before feats that carry questionable survival odds. It seems to be an expression of confidence." The commander's face twisted into a mask of restrained horror. "And you're telling me they use this regularly?" "Yes, Commander," Aura confirmed. "On their home planet, it's a common phrase in social gatherings. Many humans seem to derive enjoyment from it." The council shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their alien features displaying varying degrees of unease. Enjoyment from behavior that others would consider suicidal? This was beginning to sound like a real threat. Commander YCK let out a heavy sigh, tapping his claws against the table in deep thought. "Very well. From this day forward, the phrase, 'Hold my beer,' will be classified as a Category A threat phrase in the Galactic Alert System. Any incident involving a human using this phrase will automatically trigger a Level 5 security lockdown." A murmur of agreement swept through the room. No one questioned the measure. After all, it wasn't just the damage that was terrifying. It was the utter lack of logic, the complete disregard for self-preservation that humans exhibited whenever they uttered those fateful words. Without wasting any time, the council began disseminating the new protocol to all Federation stations and outposts. Alerts were issued to warn all personnel. If a human says, "Hold my beer," consider the area compromised. Evacuate if necessary and do not attempt to intervene. Days later, back on Tarks 4, Lieutenant Krax and Chief Ensign Vec stood by, watching as the newly implemented security protocol was put into action at their station. A series of hollow screens now flashed the following warning. "Notice, human presence detected. If you hear the phrase, 'Hold my beer,' evacuate immediately." Krax let out a heavy sigh as he adjusted his communicator. "Feels a bit much, doesn't it?" Vec antenna drooped in exasperation. Are you kidding, Cracks? If you had seen that human up close, you'd understand. They thrive on danger. You'd think pain receptors were optional. As if on cue, the station's door whooshed open, and a group of humans casually strolled in. They were carefree and completely oblivious to the sense of impending doom that seemed to follow them wherever they went. One of them, a tall, wiry human with messy hair and a tattoo reading Yankees on his arm, waved cheerfully at Cracks and Vec. "Hey, officers, just stopping by to take a look around," the human said with a grin. Vec forced a weak smile and nodded. "Welcome. Just remember, please refrain from any sudden improvisations." The human tilted his head, raising an eyebrow. "Improvisations? Nah, we're just here to sightsee," he said, though his grin widened as he added, "I did hear there's an old planetary defense tower on this station that hasn't been used in a century. Bet it'd have a heck of a view from up there." Vec's antenna shot straight up in alarm. "That area is off limits. It's structurally unsound." The human winked. "Got it, officer. We'll stay clear. Unless, it looks really interesting." Crax's scales prickled with dread. He knew humans had a peculiar definition of interesting, one that often led to potentially explosive outcomes. Sure enough, hours later, a distress call came through the command center. The hollow screen flared to life, and there on the feed was the same human they'd spoken to earlier, now perched precariously on the edge of the ancient tower. He was balancing what looked suspiciously like a homemade rocket launcher on his shoulder. And then, unmistakably, they heard it. "Hey y'all, hold my beer." Crax's heart sank as the station sirens blared to life. The screen cut to static, and the tower shook violently, sending debris flying in every direction. Station personnel scrambled, shouting orders and ducking behind cover. The human's voice crackled back over the intercom. Come on. I thought it'd be fun. Just needed a little more kick to see the whole station, that's all." Emergency lights flashed, bathing the command center in a red, pulsing glow. Security personnel rushed, clutching their equipment as the rumbling subsided, leaving a stunned silence. Commander YCK's voice crackled through the comms, demanding an immediate report. Cracks stammered, struggling to process the chaos. "Commander, it was the humans again. They, found the tower." "And did they say the phrase?" YCK's tone was tight, verging on panic. "Yes, Commander. Clear as day." "Blast it," YCK growled. "Engage immediate containment protocols for all human visitors. From this point forward, every single one will be escorted by security personnel." Over the following weeks, the new containment protocols were enforced. Humans on every planet, ship, and station were assigned at least 2 security officers to monitor them at all times. Simply put, humans thrive on chaos. Vin began, her voice calm yet firm. "Any environment that allows for improvisation or unanticipated actions will only encourage their behavior. However, if we create spaces that are deliberately dull and restrictive, void of stimulation and temptation, we may be able to discourage them from attempting anything at all." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "Think of it as boredom containment." The room fell silent, the council members mulling over this unorthodox proposal. "Human proofing, you say?" Commander Urick repeated, his brow furrowed. "And what would that entail exactly?" Vin began explaining her plan, her tentacle sweeping over a series of diagrams and blueprints projected on the table. "For instance, in stations where humans frequently visit, we could install equipment that appears non-functional or outdated, things they wouldn't think to modify or improve. Walls that look impenetrable, doors that open at agonizingly slow speeds to deter curiosity about what lies inside." Counselor Renak raised an eyebrow, clearly concerned. "And what about recreational areas? They seem like prime targets for their creativity." "Exactly," Vin nodded in agreement. "Our simulations show that humans are most likely to engage in risky behavior when they have an audience. So, we'll design recreation areas that are, shall we say, discouraging. Harsh lighting, muted colors, monotonous music, and perhaps even broken equipment. Nothing that would capture their attention or spark excitement." The room was quiet as the council considered this radical approach. Commander Urick tapped his claws thoughtfully, weighing the potential of the plan. "It's unorthodox," he said after a long pause, "but we have no other viable options." He sighed, conceding, effective immediately, "We are to implement human-proofing measures across all Galactic Federation stations. We will spare no expense in making these environments as uninviting as possible." And so, the campaign to human-proof the galaxy was set into motion. The council mandated the installation of dimly lit corridors, bland-colored recreation rooms, and break areas adorned with a disproportionate number of out-of-order signs. Gyms were furnished furnished with only the most basic exercise machines. No heavy weights, no ropes to climb, and absolutely nothing that could suggest an opportunity for a challenge or an adventure. Reports began to roll in from across the galaxy. Officers stationed on Cortex Prime were among the first to report the stunning results. One human visitor wandered into the newly revamped recreation center, surveyed the uninspired surroundings, muttered something about it being a sad excuse for a gym, and promptly left. Over the next few days, the number of incidents dropped dramatically. Humans were visibly bored, and many chose to leave stations early, presumably in search of more stimulating environments elsewhere. The council was overjoyed, declaring the human-proofing protocol an overwhelming success. But not everyone shared their enthusiasm. On Station Galvan 12, where the human-proofing measures had been enforced most rigorously, the resident maintenance officer, Jack, found himself observing a group of human visitors from the shadows. Unlike the command center staff, he had a front-row seat to humanity's day-to-day behavior. The humans wandered aimlessly around the dreary recreation center, frowning at the harsh fluorescent lights and worn-out furniture. They were restless, pacing as though they were caged animals. Jack's eyes followed one of them, a man named Travis, who finally broke the silence. "Okay, this place is literally designed to be the most boring place in the galaxy," Travis muttered to his companions, shaking his head in disbelief. "This is like a punishment, not a gym." Room went silent as the implications of Aura's words sank in. Commander Yurik lifted his head, his expression one of grim realization. "So, we've been trying to suppress their natural instincts by creating an environment that lacks stimulation, and all we've done is give them more room to invent chaos?" Aura nodded again. "Precisely. When there is no excitement, no challenge, humans will create it themselves. It's hardwired into their behavior. In fact, the more they're confined or restricted, the more resourceful they become in finding ways to push boundaries." Yurik leaned back in his chair, his claws tapping rhythmically on the table as he processed the information. The council, normally composed and decisive, now appeared exhausted and uncertain. "We've underestimated them," Yurik muttered, his voice heavy with frustration. "We tried to stop their chaos with boredom, but instead, we've sparked even greater disruption." Councillor Renak let out a long breath. "How do we stop them if they thrive on breaking the rules? How do we even contain that?" The council fell into deep contemplation. There were no easy answers. After a long pause, Enin Aura spoke again, her voice soft but firm. "What if we accepted it? What if, instead of trying to suppress their energy, we channeled it? Let them engage in controlled chaos, within parameters that still protect the stability of the stations. Perhaps we can set up more structured challenges, tasks that encourage their creativity but with clear limits." Commander Yurik's eyes narrowed. "So you're suggesting we embrace their chaos, but on our terms?" "Yes," Aura replied. "Give them room to stretch their limits, but in ways that are productive. We could design tasks or projects where their need to improvise can be put to use for the Federation. If we provide the right kind of challenges, we can keep them occupied, and maybe, just maybe, we can control the chaos while letting them feel like they're pushing boundaries." Yurik sat up straighter, his face hardening with determination. "I don't like it," he admitted, "but it's the only option left. We need to stop fighting their nature and start guiding it. Maybe it's time we stop fearing their unpredictability and use it to our advantage." The council members exchanged wary glances, but they all seemed to agree that this was their only path forward. "Very well," Commander Yurik said, the resolve returning to his voice. "We'll implement a new approach, controlled chaos, set up tasks and challenges that give the humans the space they need to thrive, but keep it within boundaries that we can manage. No more futile attempts to suppress them. We'll work with their nature, not against it." As the council moved forward with this new plan, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into unknown territory. But, as always, humans had a way of defying expectations, and it seemed the galaxy would have to learn to live with that fact. The room went silent as the grim realization settled in. There was no easy way to contain human unpredictability. Every attempt to suppress their chaos had only fueled it. At that very moment, on Station Galvan 12, the humans were preparing for a second round of dance-offs, this time complete with a scoreboard and a betting pool. Travis, undeterred by the previously collapsed table, was rallying his friends with shouts of, "Let's see what else we can break." Jack, watching the scene unfold from a hidden corner, sighed deeply and switched off his communicator. Reporting the incident now felt futile. The galaxy was learning something the hard way. For humanity, boredom wasn't a limitation. It was a blank canvas, a chance to push the boundaries of what was possible or ridiculous. The news of the failure of human-proofing spread like wildfire through the Galactic Federation. News networks broadcast the incidents from Station Galvan 12, showing bewildering footage of Travis and his friends dancing on flimsy tables, laughing and challenging one another to top that. Every few minutes. It became clear that every attempt to contain the humans only made them more determined to bend, break, or redefine the rules of reality. The council, now exhausted, was running out of ideas and patience. Some officers even joked that humans seemed to treat every challenge as though the laws of physics were merely suggestions. They'd build something absurd, ride it until it fell apart, laugh, and then create a new version. It was baffling. So, when Commander Yurik called for a final emergency session, it was no surprise to see the counselors in a state of resigned exasperation. Yurik paced in front of them, feathers fluttering with frustration as he tried to maintain his usual composure. Clearly, human proofing has failed, he said, his voice tight. Containment strategies, boring recreation centers, nothing works. In fact, everything we've tried has only encouraged them. But we must try something else. A weary officer muttered, "Commander, we could send them somewhere that isn't worth exploring, like Sector 12B. It's nothing but dust storms and sand. Are we suggesting we exile humans to sand planets now?" Another counselor asked incredulously. "If that leaks to the humans, they'll probably start a sandcastle competition and claim the planet as a vacation hotspot." The council broke into nervous chuckles, but Yurik's feathers bristled with frustration. "Enough," he snapped. "We are not out of options, but it's clear we need new experts on human behavior, someone who understands them better than we do." At that, Counselor Vin's eyes brightened slightly, as though a light bulb had gone off in her mind. "What if we enlisted humans?" The counselors stared at her, expressions of shock and confusion crossing their faces. Yurik, too, looked taken aback. "Humans?" he echoed. "To control other humans?" "Yes," Vin replied, leaning forward. "Think about it. They understand their own culture, their quirks, their peculiarities. They might know what to avoid or how to distract their kin. Besides, if we explain the importance of maintaining order, maybe they'd be willing to help us. If they're in on the effort, they might be less inclined to defy it." There was a tense pause before Counselor Riak slowly nodded. "It's risky, but it might be the only plan we haven't tried. Let's call it Operation Ally, an effort to recruit select human individuals as advisors." Yurik looked around at the nodding counselors, then gave a reluctant nod himself. "Very well. Operation Ally is authorized. Let us hope the humans are willing to cooperate." Soon after, a select group of human diplomats and behavioral experts was summoned to the Galactic Council's central meeting chamber. Among the humans were Mara and Tom, seasoned consultants with extensive experience in cross-species negotiation and cooperation. Both were highly regarded for their deep understanding of alien cultures, making them ideal candidates to address the Federation's growing issues with human unpredictability. The humans were briefed on the situation, shown footage of the chaotic incidents, and presented with extensive data detailing the Federation's failed attempts at containing human behavior. As the presentations came to a close, Mara sat back in her chair, stifling a chuckle. "So, let me get this straight," she began, her tone amused. "You've tried making things as boring as possible, thinking that would keep us out of trouble?" The council exchanged uncertain glances, some nodding hesitantly. Tom, unable to hold back any longer, burst out laughing. "You poor guys. No offense, but that's exactly what drives us to do something crazy. Give us a boring situation, and we'll find ways to shake things up." Commander Yuri's feathers ruffled in confusion. "So, your suggestion is to stop making things boring?" "Not exactly," Mara replied with a grin. "But you have to understand, humans love a challenge. We're wired to push boundaries. In situations that lack stimulation, we invent our own fun. It's a compulsion, really." She leaned forward, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "You need to give humans something to focus on, or they'll turn your entire galaxy into their playground." Counselor Vin made a worried gesture with her tentacles. "But we can't make everything a challenge. That's impractical." No, you don't have to make everything exciting," Tom interjected, leaning forward. "But if you want us to follow the rules, you have to make us feel like we're part of something meaningful. Give us tasks with clear goals, maybe even make it competitive. If we feel like we're contributing, we'll be a lot less likely to mess with your systems. Call it constructive engagement." The council exchanged wary glances, murmuring among themselves. Commander Yuri, clearly contemplating the wisdom in their words, nodded thoughtfully. With the guidance of the human consultants, the Federation devised a new strategy, the Galactic Cooperative Initiative. This program would create roles for humans, allowing them to participate in Federation activities ranging from designing innovative technology to solving complex problems within stations. The key to this plan was competition. Each task would be scored, each station's efforts ranked, and, of course, awards would be given for the most efficient, most creative, and most innovative solutions. To the humans, it was irresistible. The results came quickly, and to the Federation's surprise, they were astonishingly effective. Humans across the galaxy eagerly embraced their their new roles, transforming their boundless energy from chaotic stunts into productive contributions. New ship designs, more efficient energy generators, and, perhaps most importantly, a significant reduction in unauthorized human activities were reported. The competition quickly became the most popular program across the galaxy. The Federation tracked progress, announcing monthly rankings and handing out colorful badges as incentives. For the first time in a long while, the Federation felt they were on the right path to managing humanity's unpredictable nature by embracing it, not fighting it. The humans were riveted by the new initiative. However, not all Federation members were convinced that the problem had been solved. On the outer rim of the galaxy, Ensign Bork, a weary counselor and skeptic of Operation Ally, reviewed security logs with suspicion. Something about the humans' cooperative behavior felt off. There had been far too few incidents, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were simply gearing up for something bigger. One afternoon, Bork came across a report from an outer rim station. The humans there had begun hosting their own competition, a personal best challenge, where they tried to outdo each other in harmless but eccentric stunts. The station's mess hall had turned into a creative playground, with humans constructing elaborate contraptions from everyday objects. Commander Yuri, Bork urgently reported through the comms, the humans are back to their antics. They've just found a new way to channel their madness. It's spreading again. Meanwhile, on Station Delta 19, Travis and his friends had decided to participate in the Galactic Cooperative Initiative with a twist. They were determined to rank at the top, no matter the cost. But they had little interest in following the rules. Instead, they devised a series of stunts that technically achieved the set goals, but did so in the most outrageous ways possible. One week, they were tasked with optimizing the station's cooling system. Instead of simply adjusting the controls, Travis rigged up a complex system of fans, hoses, and a custom-made ice dispenser. The contraption cooled an entire level, but at the expense of half the cafeteria's ice supply and an alarming amount of duct tape. When they submitted their entry for review, the entire council was left speechless. Commander Yuri rubbed his temples, clearly exhausted. At least they're being constructive, he sighed, even if it's unorthodox. The Galactic Cooperative Initiative continued, but in a way no one had anticipated. Humans across the galaxy had earned a reputation as the go-to problem solvers, the troubleshooters of last resort. But they did it all with an unpredictable flair that kept everyone on their toes. Federation officers grew accustomed to hearing the phrase, "Hold my beer," followed by surprisingly successful, albeit bizarre, results. Counselor Vin addressed the council as they reviewed the latest batch of human projects. "It seems we've underestimated the adaptability of humans," she said. "They thrive on novelty, challenge, and humor. It's clear they'll never be fully predictable, but maybe, just maybe, we don't need them to be." Yuri stared at the screen, watching footage of humans performing yet another unorthodox but effective solution on Station Delta 19. A mix of exasperation and reluctant relief washed over him. They hadn't exactly solved the problem of human unpredictability, but they had finally found a way to manage it, for now, at least. The galaxy could rest, knowing that when humans said, "Hold my beer," there'd be a purpose behind it. Months into the Galactic Cooperative Initiative, the Federation had settled into an uneasy peace around humanity's unique approach to problem solving. In many ways, the galaxy had learned to expect the unexpected. Human proofing had become a thing of the past. Federation engineers had designed systems that were, at best, human-resistant. And while the galaxy now operated with a certain understanding of humanity's chaotic ways, the truth was that no one could truly predict what would come next, least of all the humans themselves. But perhaps that was the key to their undeniable effectiveness. "Then we improvise," Kendra said with a shrug, not missing a beat. Commander Thriss stared at her, his antennae twitching in disbelief. "Improvise? This is not the time for improvisation. This is a galactic emergency." Maddox, however, was undeterred. "Don't worry, Commander. We've done worse with less. Trust me, we've got this." His grin never faltered as he and his team continued to work, as if the end of the galaxy were just another day at the office. The other officers, alien and human alike, gathered around the display as Maddox explained their next steps. The gravity deflector array they were designing would require dismantling parts of the station's core infrastructure, including essential systems that kept life support running. The risk was monumental, but Maddox and his team seemed completely unfazed. "We'll use these old parts," Maddox said, gesturing to a pile of surplus tech. "No one's used them in ages, but they'll work. We'll just hook them up to the deflector modules and boom, we'll redirect the star's gravitational pull. It won't be easy, but it'll hold." Thriss's anxiety only deepened as the humans worked at an alarming pace, disassembling vital equipment and re-engineering it into something new. "You're taking apart our life support backups," a concerned Zal medic gasped, tentacles tentacles twitching nervously. What if it fails? Kendra looked up from the display, her expression casual. Then we'll fix it, is what we do. Plan B is always ready. Plan B. Thrissa's voice was strained with panic. What is Plan B? Kendra's grin was almost too casual. If this thing blows up, we'll improvise, remember? She turned back to the screen, clearly unbothered by the immense risk they were taking. Within minutes, Maddox's team had activated dormant drones and repurposed the supplies they had scavenged. They worked with a focus and speed that seemed reckless to the other officers, but Maddox and his team were eerily calm. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of tension, Maddox and his team completed the setup. They connected the last module, and the station's alarms, which had been blaring for what seemed like hours, suddenly quieted. Maddox stood back and crossed his arms with a satisfied smile. All right, let's see what happens. Thriss, his antennae still twitching, barely dared to breathe as the newly constructed gravity deflector array hummed to life. The display showed the readings gradually improving, slowly but steadily. The gravitational anomaly had been contained, and the station was no longer in immediate danger. We did it, Maddox said with a grin, slapping Thriss on the back. Piece of cake. Now where's that beer I promised? For a moment, Thriss just stood there, speechless. Then, as the realization sank in, a strange sense of awe crept over him. These humans, reckless as they were, had just saved the station. He had no idea how they had done it, but the impossible had been accomplished once again. As the crisis averted and the Federation officers began to breathe a little easier, Commander Thriss could only shake his head. He had expected chaos, and, true to form, that's exactly what he got. But somehow, against all odds, the humans had pulled through. Back in the command center, Commander Yuri watched the reports roll in, his face unreadable. The humans had found yet another way to defy logic and expectations, but for once, Yuri didn't feel the usual frustration. Instead, he felt something else, reluctant respect. As the galaxy adapted to humanity's peculiar brand of chaos, it was becoming clear that these unpredictable, reckless beings might just be the Federation's greatest asset. And maybe, just maybe, the galaxy could learn to live with the chaos they brought. Because when humans said, "Hold my beer," there was often more than just madness behind it. Then we improvise. Plan B. Plan B, Commander Thriss repeated, his voice trembling. There's a plan B? Kendra winked with a carefree smile. Oh, there's always a plan B. We'll figure that out if plan A blows up. The alien officers exchanged horrified glances, but too stunned to object, they watched as the humans continued assembling their gravity deflector array. Despite their skepticism, there was nothing to be done except watch the unfolding chaos. When the contraptions were finally secured around the station's hull, Maddox activated the system with an exaggerated flourish. The system hummed to life, and the display showed the readings slowly, very slowly, improving. For the next several hours, the array held steady. The station's instruments showed a stabilizing trend, and it seemed that, despite the absurdity of it all, the humans' ridiculous contraption might actually work. Thriss watched in awe as Maddox and his team took readings, made adjustments, and executed occasional patch jobs with alarming precision and speed. It was chaos, but somehow it was effective. Just as hope began to settle over the station, a jarring alarm echoed through the halls. The main power grid, overworked by the makeshift system, began to surge erratically. Oh, Maddox muttered, eyeing the warning lights that blinked in warning. He turned to his team with an unspoken command. All right, team, plan B time. The humans leaped into action with an almost terrifying enthusiasm. They grabbed anything that could conduct electricity, wires, panels, anything they could find, and raced toward the power core, yelling commands to each other in jargon so thick and chaotic that Thriss couldn't make sense of a single word. Within minutes, they had cobbled together what looked like a ridiculous tangle of wires, panels, and emergency ration canisters. Maddox grinned wildly as he threw a switch, chanting with reckless optimism, "Here goes nothing." With a shuddering groan, the station's power stabilized, and the gravitational disruption outside was finally brought under control. The alien officers, who had been watching in stunned silence, slowly realized that somehow, impossibly, the humans had saved the station. Commander Thriss stood frozen for a moment, speechless. Maddox, clearly unfazed by the near catastrophe, slapped him on the back with a grin. Piece of cake. Now, where's that beer I promised? In the aftermath, the council convened to assess the operation. Despite their initial horror, the council could not deny the fact that the humans humans had not only saved the station but possibly an entire sector. But as they reviewed the incident footage, with Maddox's gleeful "hold my beer" as the kickoff to it all, they came to a disquieting realization: the phrase had taken on a new, almost mythic status. "It seems," Commander YCK noted dryly, "that we need to revise our protocols once again." Counselor Vin smirked knowingly. "Perhaps we simply need to accept that humans will never fit within a predictable model. They do what they do, and somehow it works." YCK sighed deeply, a tired smile crossing his face. "Very well. As of now, every time a human says, 'hold my beer,' all nearby Federation officers are to activate yellow alert status and prepare for anything." The official decree, now logged as Standard Operating Procedure 42, read as follows: Federation Protocol 42. Hold my beer. In the event a human utters the phrase, "hold my beer," all personnel are to assume that any imminent action is both risky and statistically improbable to succeed, yet likely to yield unprecedented results. Maintain caution and proceed with guarded optimism. The following week, Maddox and his team received official acknowledgement from the Federation for their efforts in saving Station Krex. As they celebrated back on Earth, Maddox raised his glass, winking at his team. "To the most ridiculous, insane, impossible stunts the galaxy will ever see," he toasted. His team joined in with hearty laughter, voices overlapping as they recounted moments of their wildest adventures. And while they never knew it, their toast, "hold my beer," echoed throughout the galaxy, the phrase solidifying its place as the Federation's symbol of brave insanity. From that day forward, whenever a human uttered those infamous words, every officer in the galaxy braced themselves, not for disaster, but for a kind of miracle. They had finally come to expect the chaotic, creative, and uniquely human. And that concludes today's story. If you stayed with us until this moment, please subscribe and like the video, and stay tuned for more stories. Goodbye, human.